welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed my show. I'm glad that you guys can join me on this 350, third episode, I believe. We are here. It is, what are we on, Thursday of the week? We're almost hitting Friday, as people call it. I see my guest is here, and I want to bring my guest on. Let me pull his information up first. There we are. And we are joined with Dr. Jeff Rich. If StreamYard was fighting me, Jeff. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm well, Jamal. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. Running a bit behind this morning, but otherwise I'm intact. And just to bring you on, honestly, we're joined with Dr. Jeff Rich. Dr. Jeff Rich is a historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia. He has a PhD in history and over 3 decades of experience in government. He created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack, where he shares his commentaries, book reviews, and interviews on world history, culture, and politics. Jeff has written several books, including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. And Jeff, I'm happy that you can join me. Thank you for
It's
joining
good.
me,
It's good
man.
to join you.
Um,
I realized
I
just
guess,
now. Sorry, I realized just now, Jamal. It's the anniversary of Hiroshima today as well. So, given a bit of a
yes, it
historian,
is.
we probably should mark that day as well.
Well, and what's wild about it, we're still in a situation where it seems like Japan did not acknowledge that the United States dropped the bomb,
And
which
more
is wild.
significantly yet, the United
Like,
States
meaning
cannot bring
this,
itself
and
to
even when Obama
apologize.
bombed it, and it can't bring itself to apologize. Well, let me
Yeah.
ask you this: should it apologize?
Should the United States
You
apologize
saying
for?
yes?
Oh, absolutely. I absolutely think so. Yes. I mean, there's arguments about it, I guess, and many American officials are reluctant to apologise. Even Barack Obama couldn't bring himself to apologise. But it was an unnecessary act that really did not contribute to the war. It followed on from the fire bombings of multiple cities in Tokyo. Was coloured by racist attitudes from the Americans as well. So yeah, I just think it's one of the great war crimes, really, and 81 years afterwards, it's really about time the United States apologised. And what's more, that it face up to the fact that it has been the only country in the world that has ever used nuclear weapons or atomic weapons in war. And there's a report today that Elbridge Colby is now developing a policy paper for the White House to put more options on the table for the US president to use limited tactical nuclear weapons in regional wars, wherever the United States should choose to do. So, unless the United States faces up to the history of the use of the atomic weapon, we're always going to live under the shadow that the United States might choose, as so many of its officials over the years have, advocated a first strike use of nuclear weapons. And that is utterly catastrophic.
But can't you make
So,
the argument that you apologize for things that you feel sorry about? Like, meaning, I apologize if I think I've done something wrong.
hmm.
If I think that it was justified, I don't apologize. Meaning, from the perspective of the US, we didn't do anything wrong. We were fighting a war. Japan attacked us first, and we finished the war with nukes. What about, how do you deal with people who make that argument? Because
Well,
that is an argument that people will make to you.
well,
It's a war.
I think the historians have
And by the way,
generally.
I'm not accepting that argument.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
sure
No,
that's my
no,
argument.
no.
I'm just
And look,
saying.
this is the thing. Like Lindsay, much missed Lindsey Graham would, actively say, if it's okay for the US to have used the atomic bomb at Hiroshima, then surely Israel can do it in Gaza. I mean, he actually said something like that. It's and
Yes.
unless that virus is removed from the American strategic culture, we're always going to live with this thing. But I think historians generally have the view that Japan would have ended the war without the use of nuclear weapons. So it was if you like, it was a disproportionate use of force, a criminal disproportionate use of force to achieve a limited military objective. I mean, there are some arguments that it was partly meant to be a threat, I guess, to the Soviet Union. But generally, the opinion, and I mean, I spoke to Richard Overy, who's arguably one of the world's leading historians of World War II, who's written a book about the end of the war, which I have here somewhere. Where is it called? Yeah, there we go. Reign to Ruin, which, and he basically argues it was not a necessary thing, and the more relevant factor in terms of ending the war was the internal situation within Japan as well. So the argument that it was justified as a way of ending the war is not, I think, valid, and it is a dangerous sort of illusion, because it supports this constant belief that the United States might be justified again to use atomic or nuclear weapons aggressively and as a first strike weapon, or under the illusion that they can somehow use limited tactical nuclear weapons in a controlled manner that won't sort of have an impact on anyone else or provoke a general nuclear war. And the world's known for a long time that not just because of the immediate damage of the nuclear weapons, but the consequential impacts on environment, food supply, all this sort of stuff, temperatures, all sorts of things, sort of nuclear winter, it will be catastrophic for the world. So it's just something that the United States needs to get out of its system, and I think the way it has to start to get out of its system is by apologising for Hiroshima. So
I don't. That apology is going to be a long time waiting. I can tell you that. Because I
yeah,
don't think we
well,
believe it's wrong. Like meaning,
hey,
it's like I accept your opinion, but that doesn't affect how we
that's
feel about it,
okay.
right?
We can agree to disagree.
Well, look, I'm not saying. Look, I agree with you. I think
Yeah.
the Russians entering the war had a larger impact than the nukes, from my point of view.
Well, but
I mean, I could
also,
be
I
wrong.
mean, there was. It's also the internal situation in Japan was significant as well. So there was a
Yeah,
lot of opposition to the war. There was war fatigue, I guess.
I guess the question is, did the
Yeah,
U.S. have that knowledge in advance? Meaning, you're fighting a war. There's a fog of war. You have a nuclear weapon. You look. There may be various reasons, right? We want to put an exclamation point. We want to end this. We think this is the thing. This is the big thing that's going to end it. To show just radical power. We don't want our boys to continue fighting. That's the one they used to use. We don't want our
yeah,
boys
yeah,
to have to keep fighting the war.
yeah.
What do you make of any of those arguments?
Well, I guess if you use a aggressive weapon in a sort of angry way with a friend, and you accidentally sort of stab them in the heart, you don't say to them as they're sort of dying out in the hospital, Oh yeah, but I was justified to use it because I didn't know something would happen. I
Japan was
think
not our
80
friend.
years,
Japanese were monsters.
whatever the pros and cons, the balance of the arguments about whether there was foreknowledge and all that sort of thing, and how much of the threat was inflated within the United States and all that sort of thing. It's still the case that surely after realizing the consequences of what you've done, the United States ought to be saying, well, we may have thought we were justified at the time, but given the consequence we've created for the world by using these weapons for killing whatever it was, 250,000 people in a day, and for the shadow that's sat over the world ever since of a nuclear World War III. Surely, regardless of whether you can point to some possible justification, you would still say, from your responsible adult self, I'm sorry that I did that. I didn't realize all those bad things would happen out of this, perhaps, but I'm still sorry that I did it. And I really think that's the approach the United States should take, rather than sort of
One
dig,
last point on
their
this.
heels in and say, we were justified to do it.
Well, I mean, the Japanese weren't our friends, and let's be honest, they were monsters in that war. Like, meaning, if would South Koreans
Well,
or would the Chinese?
the civilians in Tokyo, the civilians in Hiroshima, the civilians in Nagasaki were not monsters.
I do get that, but if you're talking to the South Koreans, if you're talking to the Chinese, would they be bleeding hearts over this? I mean, they were maligned. I mean, look, this gets to the whole conversation about whether or not a population is culpable for the things that the state does. Meaning, when the United States goes out and murder people in another country, is it the population of the United States culpable for what the government of the United States is doing? There's going to be consequences for the behavior, right? I mean, like, meaning if your government, backed by your tax dollars, backed by your population centers, because you're churning those people out into the military, goes out and slaughters a bunch of Russians, how are you going to feel some kind of way when the Russians come back and visit that pain back to your population? I guess this is this. It's like I think I agree with you on the whole thing of okay, well, you didn't really need to use the nuke, right? I agree with that premise. By the same
Yeah,
token, I also know that anytime you create a weapon like this, it's always going to be used once, because otherwise nobody is going to fear the weapon because the weapon was never
yeah,
used. That's not a justification for using it. But you're making the point of saying, is there culpability among populations for what their government does? And I'm saying this as an American, knowing full well what my government is doing. And it's the same thing true for Japan, and it's the same thing true for Germany in the Second World War.
Well, I guess the other thing is I mean, there's, I don't know, I can't remember all the details of the historical record, but there have been multiple times since when US generals, senior US officials have contemplated, use of atomic or nuclear weapons since them. Like MacArthur talked about it, I think, during the
Yes,
Korean War. I think there were
absolutely.
other instances in the late 50s. I think there were incidents in the 60s. There's the Cuban Missile Crisis, clearly,
Yeah.
where there was a bunch of them that were red hot to do it. All those kind of things. And look, the China Japan issue is complicated as well, I guess. Well, not I mean, complicated. It's a bit of a difficult word. It still obviously the war deeply affects the relationship there,
Yes.
and also the memory of the war is quite important within the sort of state ideology, I guess, within China as well. I I do feel both China and Japan need both to come to some better reconciliation rather than to you know, sort of, you know, to accuse current day Japan of acting like imperialist, nationalist, militaristic Japan of, you know, the 1935 to 1945. And I know, including guests I've had on my show and guests who've been on your show, get quite hot under the collar on this issue. But
Yes.
I do feel, ultimately, 80 years afterwards, there needs to be, you know,
Reconciliation.
some sort of that let's put that behind us and let's move on
Yeah,
and think about
reconciliation.
different sort of things. And I genuinely think the United States apologising for the use of a nuclear weapon would probably help with that. You know, and you know, it wasn't just the use of a nuclear weapon against Japan. You know, they military occupied Japan for the
Yes,
next
they
8 or so years, and in a way,
did.
they
Yes, they
still
did.
do.
Yes. Yeah, we're still there. Okinawa. If I'm not mistaken, my cousin was
Yeah,
there. My cousin was
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Sir, some of us stay there. Okay, yeah. I mean, look, I think that's an interesting conversation. And I look, it's like I said, I agree with you that it wasn't necessary. Um, yeah, I agree with you. It wasn't necessary. I mean, killing 250,000 people, you know, I don't know. I guess I feel like this is modern blindness of sorts or modern clarity. Like
How do
we
you
were
mean?
at war where millions of people were being killed. Like when you're talking about a war where 40, 50 million people are killed or dead, and you think to yourself, okay, well, they killed 250,000 in a day. Oh, well, is it that? Like, meaning, did we just get callous because of the level of people that were being killed on a daily basis? That pain and suffering and mayhem just didn't factor into it. Meaning, I'm trying to understand because I think practically any weapon like that is always going to be used once. I'm not saying we should have done it.
Yeah,
I'm just saying it
yeah.
just seems like how do you
I mean,
scare what is
there.
Carl Jha has a saying that the Chinese have of what is it, killing the chicken to scare the monkey. I think that's what he used, like kill the chicken to scare the monkey. I think on some level that's what that was. And I agree with you. That
Right.
doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it right.
Yeah, well, I just think that's not particularly impressive from Carl, but
Yeah, that's a hell of a saying. That's a
yeah,
hell of a saying.
you know, I mean, from memory, the United States lost either 400,000 or both Britain and the United States lost 400,000 people in the war. So,
Right.
you know, the United States killing a quarter of a million people in a day. The Tokyo firebombing killed, I think, about 100,000 people in a night.
Right.
You know, incinerating them to death in the most horrific way, and you know, there's this cycle of you know, increased intensity of exterminatory violence, I guess. And it strikes me that the United States leadership elite during World War II was partly in that cycle. There was hatred
Heard some of
towards
that.
the Japanese. There was racist attitudes towards the Japanese, and that pushed away any moral qualms about doing what they did. And I just think it's time that they faced up to that.
Okay. I I think you are going to be waiting a very, very,
Oh well, yeah, I know, but you know,
very, 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 very long time. But no, I do understand the argument and I do understand the position.
yeah,
Um, one of the other wars that I want to get into is because I've been finding it very curious how the West has been trying to provoke or push this argument that Ukrainians are winning the war. And I was shocked by this. I had to be honest with you. I was very shocked by this when this started coming up in the way that the West started talking about it. Zelensky supposedly was having a 60-day offensive. They were hitting warehouses. Wildberry warehouses. Well, just to step back a moment from that, they fired their defense ministers, um, and they even ended up firing Sirski after firing the other defense minister. There were protests because apparently he was connected somehow to the Europeans, and that was somehow unliked, in which case you get the protests. Russia amps up its attacks, especially after the Wildberries attacks, where they continuously hit Wildberry factories and warehouses. Russia has been bombing the devil out of Kiev, and this is after making Odessa landlocked, basically systematically going after bases in Odessa and shutting down the ports. This does not look like winning. In fact,
No.
one after another missiles landed on Kiev, and not one interceptor came up to stop it. This is pictures coming out of somebody's window. If I can play it, there we are. Just I find this to be a catastrophe. I genuinely do.
Yeah.
Um, I'm not going to ask you how long they can keep this up because I don't really have an answer for that. But how can they really push this narrative that they were winning? I mean, not one air defense went up, even in vain. Like, meaning, even when you shoot it and miss, it wasn't even that. They just didn't have any. And this is in the context of two wars that are currently taking place. It's just amazing.
Well, it has been the approach of Ukraine in coordination with the United States and the European and British powers throughout this conflict to, talk up, that they're about to launch the grand, southern
Offense.
counter-offensive, and
Yeah.
then they were going to invade Kursk, and all these other events. So it's in a way it's nothing new that there is this extremely optimistic narrative that's placed ahead that seems to be placing Ukraine on the initiative and seems to support continued investment from Europe and the United States in the war, and lock people in behind it, and that does seem to be the case. And there's been a lot of excitement in certain quarters, including I've watched shows with Jake Sullivan and Timothy Snyder crowing about their brilliant new sort of drone warfare strategies and how it's really helping Ukraine sort of, I guess, gradually weaken Russia, even if it doesn't, throw the Russian army back. It at least weakens Russia, and they count that as a success, and they also count the deployment of these new techniques, I guess, as a success. But I think it was like a 40-day offensive that
Yeah.
Zelensky claimed was going to happen, and it certainly had some impact in Ukraine. But it has also seen a reciprocal escalation, and perhaps a more effective escalation in
Yes.
by Russia in Ukraine. And so Russia is now hitting, warehouse distribution centres in Ukraine. I was just reading just before the show in Strana.ua, which is it's not quite a dissident, but it's a non-propagandistic Ukrainian news
Magazine.
outlet, which
Yeah.
which you can easily just get Google Translate to translate into English. So it's quite a good insight into perspectives from Ukraine that are not totally, crazy. And there's talk there about possible food shortages in Kiev, and
Wow.
reports of pictures of empty shelves and things like that. So some of the distribution and logistics centres that have been hit by the Russians are having, it would seem, perhaps more consequential impacts on Ukraine, which is in a far more fragile state socially than Russia. So I agree with you; it's not justified. But that kind of happy talk sort of propaganda has been the way of the West and Ukraine since 2022, since 2014, and but it's having disastrous impact, and it does seem that Russia has turned up the dial and
Yes.
focused their effort not on NATO targets or whatever, but on putting a hell of a lot of pressure on the sort of internal sort of social systems within Ukraine,
Yeah.
which must surely weaken the regime, especially given the political troubles. I mean, you mentioned the defence minister being sacked. It wasn't just the defence. I mean, the whole government was replaced, and the
Yes.
prime minister was replaced, and and so I don't know. I haven't really heard a adequate explanation of all of this, but so the prime minister was replaced and is now the ambassador to Washington. So you could argue that is a promotion in terms of Ukraine's politics, or a perhaps more crucial role. There's, imagine being Prime Minister of Ukraine at the moment. I mean, managing the relationship with Washington is probably more critical. And the former ambassador to Washington has had to return to Ukraine because he's subject to a corruption investigation. So,
Yeah.
I mean, she's arrived back in Ukraine and is immediately in the dock for quite significant corruption. So, how stable is that situation in Ukraine? I guess no one is really sure, but given the amount of military and other pressure on it, it's just unpredictable when things like that are going to crack. But surely they're going to crack at some point.
Yeah. I don't know how they
Which
can
is
keep this
interesting in
up.
terms of Russian strategy, because we've talked about, well, should they hit NATO targets and things like that. Maybe they can, if they fundamentally weaken the Ukrainian regime and its sort of will to fight, then and not just the regime but the population, then that might have an impact as well.
Yeah. I mean, the port thing may have an impact in and of itself. I mean, Ukraine, much of their economy is coming through their ports, from my understanding. And shutting down the ports is effectively shutting down the bulk of the economy or the economic output, meaning them being
Yeah,
landlocked is devastating. So
yeah,
I suppose we'll see. I mean, I find this to be a catastrophe just because, well, obviously, all of these people dying. But it's all of these people dying in a war that they didn't ultimately want. It's that
yeah. It's
that
so sad. And
kills
it's
me.
so sad, and it's just outrageous. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I know I've spoken before about having spoken several times on my channel to Marta Havrishko, who's, I guess, a dissident Ukrainian now living in the United States, a historian and a scholar of the Holocaust and stuff like that. And she's pointed out all the bussification, and she also is at the moment particularly emphasising the fact that all these people in the West who standing with Ukraine and let's not look at all the Nazi symbols and let's not mention all that sort of stuff, and encourage this sort of extreme nationalism and encourage this offensive and actively promoted the idea of Ukraine fighting to the last Ukrainian.
Right.
Not across the political spectrum in the United States. I mean, Jake Sullivan, before he left, was was saying, yeah, Ukraine's just got to, do the right thing and, conscript younger men to fight in the war. So the immorality crosses politics there in the United States. So it is just such a tragedy, and I really do think at some point some of the Ukrainian supporters in the West might need to face up to what what they have done, because they've just absolutely destroyed a country. And it's going to have, people will be talking about it for decades, the pain, the trauma and the suffering that's been endured in Ukraine over the last, well, let's say since 2014.
The other thing I want to hit with you is Iran and Oman and the
Mm-hmm.
US. I don't know if you've been as enamored with what has been taking place around this, but I have been stunned is not the right word for it. To me, all of this is very different than what we've encountered before. You're a historian, so you correct me if I'm wrong. Um, the United States, Donald Trump does what Donald Trump does, taco. Trump chickens out. And Trump claims, I'm going to have these magnificent strikes. It's going to be the greatest since the Second World War. Now, what's wild about this is, as you and I were talking about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we dropped nukes in the Second World War. And Trump is basically saying, we're going to have strikes greater than that.
Mm.
From my understanding, Reuters, I believe, is reporting that Iran had warned GCCC countries what was going to happen in advance. Basically saying, look, your energy grid, your water desalination plants, your bridges, we are going to destroy all of it. And as a, I would say, as a minor aside to that, the fact that Ansarullah had been hitting Saudi oil fields, hitting Saudi airports, on some level, that's kind of a nod to if they can do it, and they're one of the poorest countries in the world, imagine what Iran could do.
Mm.
The GCCC countries apparently have been pushing Trump saying, don't do it, don't
Mm.
do it. And I'm pretty sure that there were people in the room telling Trump, if you do that, you're going to destroy the US economy, or at the very least damage it significantly, not just destroying the world economy. Trump relents. And he pivots to this weird thing of, well, we're in negotiations with Iran. Iran is negotiating with Oman, not the United States. And Iran has made that clear over and over and over again. And yet the Trump administration had been acting like a negotiation between Iran and Oman over the Strait was somehow a negotiation between Iran, Oman, and the United States. And he effectively used this as his dodge for why there weren't strikes. This is nonsense.
Mm.
Iran and Oman has come out basically saying we have a deal for the Strait. They're writing it up, or the basic contours of a deal, where they're going to continuously work for 60 days in order to nail down terms of the deal. The U.S. is not included in that. And Iran has made it clear the Strait doesn't open just because we have a deal, period.
Mm.
But
Mm.
have you seen anything like this in history? I mean, even this notion of sending out an email asking people if they have any creative solutions to, quote, punish Iran, unquote. Like, this is
Uh,
incompetence. I've never seen
yeah,
anything like this.
look, I mean, there really is a crisis of competence in the United States government as a whole. Um, you know, and it's sort of political leadership more broadly, I guess. I mean, you have to say Congress is part of that as well.
Yes.
So yeah, it really is striking, and it's abhorrent, and it's scary. It's comical in some ways. So I don't necessarily have an immediate comparison, but like the British Empire, leaving India in 1947 in a utterly chaotic and pathetic way was pretty incompetent as well. So there's been many stories of incompetence and stupidity, and there's a whole field of study of military incompetence as well. So it's perhaps not utterly unprecedented, but and everyone around the world at the moment is just saying that the United States is just off the charts stupid, and incompetent, and it's just an unreliable sort of partner. I mean, there are also, I guess, precedents for managing, a situation like the Hormuz Strait through some sort of agreement between multiple parties. And one of those is the Bosphorus Strait with Turkey,
Turkey.
which,
Yeah.
Turkey, and which dates from agreements in the 1920s. I think it formally ratified in 1935 or so, and I can't remember their official name. But interestingly, Neil Ferguson, the historian, wrote a paper which had the air of having been a paper that he'd submitted to the White House somehow or other, together with the former head of the Foreign Affairs Council in the US, Richard Haas, a sort of Democrat sort of advisor, but a pretty heavy hitter in the US foreign affairs establishment, proposing several months ago a solution to the Iran situation where there be some sort of international agreement brokered based on the Bosphorus Strait. But the aim of that would be to ensure that, there's no charges and that sort of thing. That there be absolutely free passage through the strait. I mean, Milton Friedman can say there's no such thing as a free lunch, but the United States can insist that they can send oil tankers through the Hormuz Strait absolutely free of charge. So,
Pretty much.
I guess the thing though is Iran and Oman have no doubt negotiated what seems like a robust deal, but given the multiple parties involved in international shipping, given the it doesn't take too long to get into UAE waters or that sort of thing, it probably needs to be a really more secure agreement, to be more than just Iran and Oman. And so, I mean, there's a case, I guess, for the United States to say, well, we should be involved. But similarly, there's a case for China, which surely controls a lot of the shipping. There's for India, which supplies, half of the, seamen of the world, working on the ships. There's a case for other countries to be involved in negotiation of those sort of arrangements, and obviously also the Gulf states, particularly the ones that are in the Persian Gulf.
Welcome,
So, I mean,
comrade.
I do think that just the deal between Iran and Oman is probably, it's a very good progress, and it will be the basis of things. But they, it's sort of like, two neighbours have made a deal that they want
Yes.
to have stick for the whole neighbourhood, and at some point the whole neighbourhood has got to be involved as well.
Oh, Jeff, we continuously disagree.
Well,
I feel like I'm saying welcome,
and
comrade.
I'm not saying that that's a
Jeff, I like
principle
this.
thing.
Wait, I like this agreement.
It's just a pragmatic thing that given all those people can do things that will stuff things up, you know, you
Well, I like
basically
this agreement
need them in the
because
tent somehow. Yeah,
I like this agreement. This agreement helps clarify things. Like, meaning because there's a
No,
reason
that's
for
cool.
it. Um, I feel like I want to say welcome, comrade Jeff, because that is a very
Comrade,
comrade, like,
Coverage.
because it feels like, well, the world is home territory and everybody owns a piece of the world, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, on some level, I agree. Believe in that. Nobody gave the planet to any particular person. But under our current model, this is going through Iranian waters. This is considered Iranian territory. Like, meaning you can make an argument that ships go to all sorts of ports, and so ports should belong to the countries because all sorts of nations end up at various ports. Okay, U.S. and no country is going to accept those terms. They're going to look at it as this is going through our waters. we're going to exert influence over something going through our waters. And we have the military power to do it, as we've demonstrated. And Oman, because this is also going through your waters, would you like to make a deal on it? We'll give you some cheddar in your pocket. And Oman says yes. Like, meaning, from their point of view, this is literally going through their waters. The fact that other countries are close, well, close is not the same as our territorial waters. Or do
Yeah,
you agree with
well,
that?
sure. Well, that's true, but I mean, I don't know what the actual channel routes and navigation routes through the Persian Gulf are, but some of those
Yeah.
ships will end up passing through other countries' territorial waters along the way as well. So look, I don't disagree with you, and I think whatever the deal between Iran and Oman is, which sounds, simple enough,
Yeah.
I don't quite understand why it involves, one route being inbound and one route being outbound. But I'm sure there are practical, navigational, or control reasons for that.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is I think the deal will be much more secure if you like, having formed that core arrangement, it gets a bit more backing from other parties involved. Now, the United States need not be part of that,
Right.
but the principal controllers of the shipping company, the countries responsible for the principal shipping companies through the Gulf Strait, through the Hormuz Strait, and I'm not quite sure what they are, but presumably China is one of them, would probably have a strong interest in that arrangement as well. So,
Well, to be clear, China was
like
getting free access. China and Russia gets free passage.
okay,
From my understanding, China and Russia were waived fees, service fees.
so I mean, all I'm saying is you can organise a deal to conclude a conflict, which is what this has done. But then, if you want to cement and have that deal operate securely over time in peacetime, you're going to have to find a way to engage the other parties who are actually involved in the process that the agreement relates to. Shipping going through an area that borders multiple states. You're going to have to get them involved and sort of on board with it as well. So it's just a practical negotiation point, really.
Right.
So yeah. So
What's
that's all I'm
interesting?
saying. And there seems to be a lot of talk from the US administration saying we won't accept any deal in which Iran controls things, which seems to be a sort of symbolic sort of thing. So it although the deal might be close, it may the US still may play
Spoiler.
spoiler, yeah.
Yeah, they may try, and I don't
Yeah.
doubt they'll try. And the entire point of Trump saying, "Well, we're part of the deal," is because they're trying to put influence on Oman in the negotiations. Basically, the U.S. is saying, "Hey, we're working with Oman," and they were right. But the U.S. was working with Oman in order to try to get around the memorandum of understanding by undercutting the leverage that Iran was going to use at their disposal. Like, meaning, if we can get ships through, then we don't really have an issue with the strait being closed, and we can attack you without your leverage being enacted. Hence their response and their aggressiveness. And I suspect that that's why Iran worked so hard to get Oman into the deal. These are
Well,
going through
it
Italian
it
water.
was. I mean, it was one of the points in the MOU, wasn't it? That
It
there'd
was
be
number
an
five.
arrangement between Iran and Oman for the passage through the strait. And so, I mean, it's sort of like, if I think back to my bureaucratic days, there would have been a working group on the Iran-Oman deal, and they've gone and done their work, and everyone else is sort of pissed off and sort of got
Yeah,
drunk for a couple of
which is
weeks,
what happened.
but they've come
Which is
back
what
with the
happened,
deal.
right? Like, you can imagine the Saudis aren't the most enthused about this. I mean, granted, their countries have been getting hit with missiles for the last X
Yeah.
number of weeks, right? But the fact of the matter is, I don't think that everybody is happy with it, but they would accept
Mm.
it because they need their oil to be able to go through the strait unencumbered. So
Yeah.
we'll see. You're right. The U.S. can play spoiler on this, and Iran has even
Mm.
said as much, basically saying, "Look,
Mm.
we have the contours of a deal, but this is not set in stone. We control
Yeah.
what comes in because we obviously need to maintain the integrity of our state. They have more control over what goes out. We split the revenues. That's the basic contours, I guess, that they've been working with. But yeah, it could change. And by the way, this doesn't end the war.
No, it
Iran is
doesn't.
very
Although,
clear that the strait doesn't
yeah,
open because
yeah,
we made a
yeah,
deal.
no, that's right. That's right, exactly. So, but it is a building block to at least some sort of more enduring arrangement post the war.
Agreed.
But I mean, the war won't end until the belligerent party, the United States, puts its guns away, basically, and
Yes.
it's hard to know. But there's surely got to be a bit of a boy who cried wolf effect starting to happen with
You would
Trump's
think.
and
You would
US's
think.
sort of constant threats. I mean, how many? I mean, I sort of it's had that effect on me. I mean, it's sort of Trump's made another threat. What the hell? But it seems to be a pretty consistent thing. The evidence of corruption around some of these announcements, etc., seems to be worthy of investigation, and it must be having an impact on other states' sort of perceptions of the United States and their sort of actions through all the diplomacy, including in Europe. There's been plenty of people in Europe who've distanced themselves from Trump on the Iran issue. So yeah, it's just hard to know. With such a unpredictable or predictably erratic and incompetent government as the United States has become, just how this will play out and what will happen. But increasingly, it looks like they're not going to commit to any potentially catastrophic military action. So
Yeah.
maybe there's just more bluster and bluffs and threats oriented towards the domestic political timetable within the United States. I don't know.
One last question before I let you go. This One of the interesting components to this is that if they come to terms for a deal, they're going to have a service fee that Oman and Iran splits. Donald Trump has been talking up this deal. Like he's been saying, hey, the strait is going to be open tomorrow. The strait is going to be open Monday. I believe on Tuesday, he put in a post saying the strait will be open on Monday, which obviously it wasn't open on Monday. CENTCOM has been claiming the Strait of Hormuz is open, even as ships still get blown up when they try to cross the Strait of
Mm.
Hormuz. I keep saying,
Mm.
alert, it's not open. I keep trying to do my best to warn ships that it's not open,
Mm.
but they don't listen to me. Um, it's wild to me that Trump is claiming there will be no fees, or at the very least, he said there will be no tolls.
Mm.
And then he's like, but we're near a deal.
Mm.
Okay, but the deal implies tolls because the only deal that's on the table is one between Oman and Iran. How weird is that? Like when European leaders are looking at this, they don't think to themselves. Like when Rutte, for example, was playing up Italy's role in the attacks on Iran, he was doing so because Donald Trump was attacking Europe for not helping him attack Iran. What do they think behind the scenes when they have an erratic leader like this? And I'm asking you because you're a bureaucrat. You may not say something openly, but you may have your own mind about what is taking place behind the scenes when you're looking at a leader that's being erratic or that's just
Mm.
radically incompetent and yet
Mm.
has nukes.
Yeah, well, look, Emmanuel Todd, the French historian who I quote quite a bit, who wrote the book The Defeat of the West, he gave an interview soon, in the first couple of months of the Trump administration, where he described the response of the European leaders at that time quite a while ago, as a group of servants in a house where the master has gone mad, and what the hell are they going to do? And it can sound demeaning to the servants, but if you think of
That's a great
if you
analogy.
think of yourself as the public servant serving a master where the minister has gone mad, you're presented with a real dilemma, because you can't just say, "Minister, you're mad, go away."
Yeah,
You and that that master can really hurt you. So I think there is quite a bit of that, and I think below the surface there's quite a few signs that Europe is doing things to sort of get a bit of distance from the United States. But there's sort of small and there's sort of partial things that are incremental and within their control. Technology decisions, and there's been a whole range of things. Even the management of the migration crisis with Spain,
yeah,
but they can't do a full-on confrontation. So, and there's they all must surely be biding the time to see what's going to happen after the midterm elections in November, and we'll probably need to reassess how to manage the Trump administration after that, because that could lead to a whole series of outcomes. But at the moment, I'd suspect what they're trying to do is avoid open conflicts, sort of appease without giving too much away, wherever you can, sort of find a bit of distance. Like Spain has banned Palantir from any involvement in the government of Spain, for example, which happened. Which I think that they'd made that decision a week or so before the NATO summit, and there's some talk that some of Trump's, exasperated, irate talk about Spain at the NATO conference was partly driven by that decision as well. So,
really.
I think that sort of thing, and there's been, quite a few of these decisions that they still, are sort of in a sort of strategic slump. So I'm not overstating it, but there's absolutely no doubt there's been a whole bunch of sort of below the radar sort of things that have been happening that are providing a bit of distance. But Europe's also dealing with the United States' open strategy within the national security strategy of meddling in European domestic politics, of favouring the sort of favouring Oman and favouring the sort of the anti-migration sort of right in Europe
Yeah,
as well.
true.
So, yeah.
But Europe mingles, well, for one, two things, and I'll let you go. That is a fantastic saying. Effectively, what is it? An insane master servants to an insane master. Oh, I love
Yeah,
that saying. I
it's a
love that
one.
saying.
It's actually. I mean, and frankly, most of the world feels like that at the moment. It's this crazy administration that still thinks it runs the world, and is sort of doing all these crazy mad things that are hurting everyone, and won't apologise for dropping nuclear weapons on anyone either, and is actually actively contemplating limited use of nuclear weapons in regional wars right now.
Yeah, yeah. The problem with
It's
that, obviously, is you're in the middle of a nuclear war the moment that you do that. Like, it's not like you can only do that against countries without nukes. You,
well,
that,
they're talking about. I mean, the regional wars are like Taiwan, so China has got nuclear weapons. So, I mean,
well, that's my point.
and this is something that Elbridge Colby has advocated, who's oversighting the paper, has advocated before, that if you could use, if you could sort of use nuclear weapons at a threshold that is scary enough but doesn't cross the threshold so much that, people
Nonsense.
will be outraged. It's
Nonsense.
it's nonsense. Yeah.
Human beings are such weird. We have such weird ways of, I don't know. Let me try to explain it this way. Um, so Russia would say, as to give an example, and why I think that idea is bonkers, and yet that's kind of the way we think about this stuff, even though it's bonkers. Russia would say, okay, if you fire a missile, that is a red line, that's grounds for us to start bombing European capitals. If indeed that takes place, meaning if you give them a missile, that missile hits the Kremlin, all bets are off. However, if you fire drones that are killing Russian citizens, that is okay. And you think to yourself, okay, but who made that evaluation? And how did they come to this assessment that, okay, within these boundaries, we're willing to have this? Russia could have very well said, any drone, missile, or anything that hits anybody in Russia, that is grounds for an attack. Like, meaning, and Europe has functioned within those rules for the most part. And Russia has also functioned within those rules. But at any point, Russia never had to accept those terms. And yet, those terms were somehow developed as this is the normal course of what we agree upon.
Yeah.
They're going with the same thing with Kobe, where he's effectively thinking, well, this won't reach the threshold of them using a nuke. Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Their nukes are gonna also be eligible for usage the moment that you use your nuke. It's just
Oh, yeah,
bonkers.
yeah. And look, I mean, there's no doubt some sort of too clever by half cunning plan that he's coming up with, and I mean, who knows? It might be involved with some sort of tripwire thing. So somehow it seems that the United States is actually not is sort of using them defensively.
Right.
It will always be presented that
Defensive
way,
nuke.
something like that.
Right.
That somehow China drove near a nuclear weapon or sailed past a nuclear ship or something like that, and therefore it was an attack on the nuclear arsenal of the United States, and therefore we can send a nuclear weapon their way. So it's just so troubling. So
Yeah. The problem with that is that's the end of the world either way,
it
regardless of
is.
this
It
idea that
is.
they're like, well, we need to be able to blame this other country. Dude, it's the end of the world either way.
I guess the question
Yeah.
is, how will the foreign policy dynamics of the United States change, if at all, after the November midterm elections? I mean, presumably Trump is going to be weakened in some way, and presumably the sort of internal the administration's internal politics will be destabilised by both loss of Congress, but also the sort of succession struggle. So will that mean they'll sort of turn away from things? Will it mean any sort of change in direction? Will it do other things? Will it mean maybe that's the time for countries like China or Russia to take more assertive steps to sort of, if you like, kick the United States when it's down politically? We will see. It will be interesting to see the week after those midterm elections.
Agreed. No, agreed. Yeah, Trump is going to be on the run. He is going to be a man on the run. I swear, man.
Yeah, yeah.
He is going to get wiped out electorally in the House, and I strongly suspect they're going to lose the Senate. And you talking about man on run? Man on.
Yeah,
Jeff, thank you for
he
this,
doesn't
man.
strike me as a very fast runner either, so I'm
He's
sure
not.
someone will
Those
be able to
hamburgers have
catch
weighed
up.
heavily on him. Yeah, he's not. He's not. He's not going to get very far very fast. He's not going to get very far. I mean, like, he's like monetized the presidency to billions of dollars. Donald
Yeah,
Trump has got like $4 or $5 billion, and this
yeah,
doesn't touch like the secret stuff that his family is involved in, like either in crypto or in real estate or military contracts. Like, it's insane. It is breathtaking. If there was any legitimacy in the integrity of the American governance and public policy, he would go to jail. He would be in a cage. Like I've never
Hmm.
seen anything like it from the standpoint of monetizing the presidency. So yeah,
Yeah.
slow runner. We'll see if the Democrats actually go after him. We'll see. Dr. Jeff Rich. Thank you, my man. Dr. Jeff Rich, he's a historian, author, retired government official from Melbourne, Australia. He has a PhD in history and over 30 years of government experience. That number is impressive. He created the Burning Archive YouTube channel and Substack, a damn good outfit, by the way. And Jeff, you have inspired me to do more book reviews, and I think I'm going to start doing so.
Cool.
Where
Let's do it.
there's yeah, I mean, there's several books that I definitely want to do a book review on, and
Excellent.
yeah, maybe get you in some of those. He shares his commentaries, book reviews, and interviews on world history, culture, and politics. He has written 4 books, including 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat. Jeff, you have my appreciation and thanks. Great breakdown,
Thank,
man. Thank you for this.
thanks,
Like you
Jamal.
said,
See you,
have a good
everyone.
night. Bye bye. Shout out to Jeff. I always enjoy those conversations. And yeah, I have to be honest with you. I've told you before, I enjoy it when I disagree. Meaning when the guest is saying something that I disagree with or that they disagree with me, a little, I don't know, something goes off in me. I I frankly enjoy it. Because from my point of view, I could be wrong. And if I am, I want to put my wrong ideas against to see whether or not I am. It's almost like sharpening a stone. But either way, shout out to Jeff or Dr. Jeff Rich. He has my appreciation. I do want to delve down into some of these issues, though. The first, and I guess since it's the first item on the title, Ukraine is getting wrecked. I think this took place yesterday, where Kiev was hit with, I think this is 4 zircons, and 24 Islanders, and not one bit of air defense met up in order to impart their capabilities to stop not one of these missiles. In fact, you can make an argument that Kiev was able to stop each and every one of the missiles with the warehouses that the missiles effectively landed into. This is through the window of somebody. I'm not going to do missile, but I will show it from this perspective to give some sense of okay, what does this look like in practice on the ground? You're a young man in Kiev or you're a young woman in Kiev. Maybe you support the war, maybe you don't. You're in your bed at night and you wake up to this. Now, to be clear, whatever your name is, I don't know, Yanukovych, Yanni, let's say Yanni. Yanni, who's laying in their bed, who wakes up to what looks like the end of the world. If you are Yanni in this analogy, you have no idea if one of those missiles is going to land near you. The reason you don't is because Ukraine has been hiding armaments in warehouses in population centers. And so when Russia blows up those warehouses, who knows what secondary explosions are going to take place in those warehouses? If you notice, one of the bombs that is flying overhead is very high in the air in a way. Beginning. Look at that first missile. It's above the house, meaning it flew above the house of the person who's looking at this. Meaning you have no idea what's behind your house. You have no idea where that missile is going to land or the other missiles are going to land. You can see the trajectory of this. These videos have been coming out back to back to back to back of Kiev effectively getting wrecked. Now, the reason Kiev is getting wrecked, and the reason it seems like there's an uptick in the Russian military, it's advanced because if you're listening to, let's say, certain Telegram channels that cover the war, you can see the speed of the advance seems to be picking up from standpoint of Russia's surrounding, and you can make an argument putting under siege Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. In the other sense, there's movement on other parts of the front lines, but I think the big, the things that you see with your eyes are the attacks that are landing on various parts of Ukraine, not just hitting Kiev. Kiev is almost like a, you can make an argument, a poster board for it, for the attacks, but also on Odessa, meaning all of the ports have been blocked. And in pursuant to those ports being blocked, ships that have been trying to get past the blockade have been attacked and fundamentally destroyed. And there's been all sorts of videos attesting to that. Also, all of this in the context of the West creating a narrative that Ukraine is once again winning the war. And I remember when I saw that, I thought to myself, how? Like, meaning you blowing up what is the equivalent of an Amazon warehouse. Okay, that sucks. That's not great. We don't like that. And yeah, if you have a loofah sponge coming in the mail, it sucks that I won't get my loofah sponge on the same day that I've ordered it. But that's very different than having military ammo depots being blown up, warehouses being blown up, where there's secondary explosions, which means you've had other materials in those warehouses that you were effectively trying to hide in those warehouses. And let's be honest, epicenter warehouse. In fact, some of these warehouses may not have been strictly military targets, but were reprisals from the soft targets that Ukraine was in. Meaning you decided to go upon a military strategy to go after soft targets to, quote, bring the war home to the Russians. And the Russians' response to that was overwhelming. It's overwhelming. Okay, maybe you don't need your gas stations. Maybe you don't need trucks that are driving by because who knows if you have drones in those trucks. Maybe you don't need warehouses because who knows, you may have drones in those warehouses. Maybe you don't need, your ports. And obviously, Putin did make the point of saying that this may be on the agenda for Russia to bring it to their side. Interestingly enough, though, the question becomes how do they do that if indeed there's something to end the war? How do you do it? Do you get Odessa in negotiations? Or is it the Russian point of view that we're going to run this military campaign until we solve this issue as a flat fact? Now, solving the issue, who knows what that means? Is that going to the Polish border? Is that somehow cutting off Ukraine from areas of Europe where Ukraine becomes this kind of rump state? I don't know. I assume that there are plans up front. I don't know those plans, and I haven't necessarily heard anybody articulate what that looks like in any real sense of the term that would ultimately make sense. My main point is, I think it's clear and obvious that Ukraine is not winning the war. And in fact, having the war take place in Iran on some level made Ukraine's lot in life that much worse. If the US is running out of armaments in the context of this war, then how on earth are we going to supply Ukraine anything? And I think the fact that Ukraine basically had no patriots to fire up, as ineffective as the patriots can be, I suppose it's something. And having Ukraine continuously hit over and over and over without any capability of doing anything about the fact that death from above is landing on their city as a result of the things that they themselves were doing. It is obvious to me that Putin has effectively let the leash go on some level, even if he hasn't necessarily let it go in its entirety. It obviously seems to be an uptick in the pace and in tempo of the Russian advance, and for that matter, a green lighting of sites that the Russians at one point didn't necessarily go after. Specifically, in this case, I'm talking about the continued attacks on Kiev. Kiev is getting wrecked. That's my point. The last thing is the deal between Oman and Iran. I don't want to retread ground, but I do think it's important to kind of make the point that Trump is full of shit. Period. Mic drop, etc. And yes, I talk about the debasement of the language in regards to our politics. Specifically, though, this channel is named Jamal Thomas. I am not into politics. I am not a political actor. I am not in government. I'm not representing anyone but this channel and myself. And so when I say that, I'm making the point of saying this debasement of the language in our political affairs is one thing. Me saying it, something else. I'm just a person. I am making the point, though, and I'm trying to make it very strongly, that what Donald Trump has been saying has been just lies, flat out lies. Donald Trump needed a way to get out of the box that he put himself in. The box he put himself in is I'm going to have the most magnificent, fantabuloso strikes in the history of strikes since the Second World War. It is going to be great and big and utterly tremendous. And Iran civilization is going to go the way of the dinosaurs because I'm Donald Trump. Now, mind you, he's saying this in the middle of a firestorm of media that is pointing out that he's running out of weapons, running out of defense weapons. And the fact that people are leaking this, they're leaking this because they're trying to influence the pace and the contours of what the United States is doing militarily in Iran. Obviously, those people don't necessarily believe that the US is going to be able to change anything and that we have been damaged as a result of what Donald Trump is doing, hence the leaks to try to get the US to stop, humiliate the administration, get them to stop. They're not as strong as they say they are. They're not as strong as they claim to be. They don't have the missiles and the weapons that they claim to have. And more to the point, we don't have the capability of having an intense fight over a prolonged period of time, not to mention in any way that won't make a difference or damage us and our material interests. Meaning Donald Trump's provocative rhetoric is happening in that context. To make it even worse, according to some of the reports that came out, Donald Trump got into it with Pete Hegseth, effectively putting a knife in him, saying, why wasn't I told that we were in this much of a shortage? Meaning, regardless of what Donald Trump is saying verbally and outside, and regardless of what CENTCOM is trying to say, well, no, we're good. We're flush with weapons. The truth of the matter is they're claiming that there was a fight, and I'm not going to say a fight. Donald Trump verbally accosted Pete Hegseth for the humiliation of the reporting on the lack of armaments and military assets in the U.S. Pentagon. Hegseth, to his credit as a drunk and a TV host, blamed his assistant and saying it was the assistant's fault, not mine. Like I said, it's a drunk and a TV host. We need more testosterone in our military. We need our men tweaking on testosterone in order to be proper war fighters. That's what we need. And then you go and lose a war. Maybe those guys' testosterone wasn't high enough. Look, the basic point that I'm trying to make is that Trump was trying to use a deal between Oman and Iran as a way, basically an off-ramp, to extricate himself on some level from a kinetic contest that was not any longer in the U.S. interest. Iran had apparently threatened, warned the GCCC countries what their response was going to be if the United States launches any more attacks on Iran. Basically, your infrastructure is toast. We will turn your cities to glass. That's what we will do if the United States continues to press their attacks. And look, they're not wrong for this, considering that the attacks that the U.S. is leveling against Iran are coming from their territory. So basically, you can't cry that you are not a participant in the war when you are clearly a belligerent, since your countries are being used to launch these strikes on my country. If indeed they do that, we will turn you to glass. We just need you to know that. We're not being angry. We're not being belligerent. We're just telling you. And they believe them because why wouldn't they do it under those terms? Hence, the pulling on the US. And in some cases, some people will make the argument, given ultimatums, of if you do this, we won't assist in you doing this. Basically, you can't use our airspace. You can't use, and there will be economic consequences, not just to your own individual material interests for the money that we're basically bribing you with, but also from the material interests of the economic well being of the US in itself. Trump is trying to use a deal between Iran and Oman to dodge from the fact that he did not have any military options in order to A, reopen the strait, or B, quote, punish Iran in a way that was not going to backfire. The deal between Iran and Oman does not include a third party. That's the long and short of it that I'm trying to bang home. It is between those two countries. And up to this point, only the contours of the deal have come into effect. Apparently, there's still things that they're hammering out. But the basic contours of the deal is Iran controls ships that go into the strait. That's obvious, right? It pertains to Iran. And the corridor that they use will be controlled by Iran. Oman has more control of ships that are leaving the strait, and the ships will go in a particular area in order to leave the strait. Again, in this case, governed by Oman. But I've seen some reports that Iran retains certain level of control despite the fact that Oman is the main controller of that situation. Again, when the deal comes out, we'll be able to read it ourselves. There will be fees collected, service fees. Those will be collected. And those will be split between Oman and Iran. Now, I would imagine there are other details of this deal that are going to have to be worked out and have to be clarified. They're expecting this to come out within a few days. One caveat: the United States has been trying to make the argument that the Strait of Hormuz should be open in a few days. It's been using the Iran-Oman deal as a way of saying that this is ultimately a deal to open the Strait of Hormuz. This is not a deal to open the Strait of Hormuz because Oman is not at war with Iran. Key point. I hope you can make key point. Oman is not at war with Iran. Iran is making a deal with Oman for the control of a management mechanism for the port that is second to the point of the war. These things are related, but these things are not related. They're related in the context of, okay, what is going to take place after the war regarding the Strait of Hormuz? There's that. The second point is, Iran is at war with America. Iran took the Strait of Hormuz in order to create leverage on America. The war with America has not stopped. The deal with Iran and Oman has nothing to do with the war with America. That's the point I'm trying to make. Yes, these things are related, but until the U.S. fulfills the obligations of the MOU, the strait is not going to open. A deal with Oman doesn't change anything about the Strait of Hormuz. Let's go to chats. By the way, Richard Wolf is going to be here at 10 o'clock. So when I end at 9, in fact, I'm going to end a little bit early because I need to set up the stream for Professor Wolf. But he is going to be here today. I haven't spoken to him in a while. I was supposed to be in Iran last month, which is why he didn't show up on Thursday. That fell through, but I couldn't necessarily get him back because I was the one that effectively broken ties on that one. However, he will be here at 10 a.m. today. It's always great to have him. It's always great to talk to him. But let's go to the chat. And by the way, like this channel, share this channel. We are trying to hit 100,000 before I drop dead. That is my goal. That is my objective. As I like to say, stealing from Rick and Morty, that is my Szechuan sauce. That is the thing to which I exist for, doing the news. And part and parcel to the rewards of doing the news is to see that people are watching, either through views or, for that matter, subscriptions. So the goal of this is to hit 100,000. Well, that is my own personal goal. That's my own personal goal. I need your help in order to accomplish that goal. So if you dig this content, you find yourself coming back to this content often, share it, subscribe to it, like the video, especially when the video is cut. Well, I suppose if you're watching it now, you don't necessarily need to watch it twice. But I hope you get my point. If indeed you find yourself coming back to this channel often, definitely subscribe. Help the channel out. Also, you can help the channel out through donations, PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, memberships, stickers, buy me a coffee. All of these things help this channel keep ticking along. So let's go to the chat. This is Alexander G. Last minute token of support. Alex, it can be as last minute as you want. You have my thanks. You have my thanks. It doesn't have to last minute all you want. Thank you for that. And this is Rambo 2702. Resistance to watching is futile. This channel is assimilating my attention in the best possible way. Live long and create. Well, thank you, man. Oh, I appreciate that, Rambo. I appreciate that. You have my thanks. By the way, I met a gentleman who apparently watched the show in person, which is always wild to me. I am going to the pharmacy, and as I am going to the pharmacy, the security guard stops me and says, "I love your show. I love your channel." And I'm like, "What? What? You're meeting me in person? Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that." Um, and he gave me a bit of information that I was very appreciative of, that I'm actually going to look up. So shout out to him. Shout out to all of you. You all have my thanks. You all have my appreciation for joining me. Like I said, Richard Wolf is going to be here at 10 a.m. So definitely come back to the channel. Trying to think, is there anything else? Oh, by the way, last point that I want to make is completely disconnected, but I do think people need to be aware of the contradiction in what's being said. In one sense, Trump is saying, we are not going to allow Iran to collect tolls on the Strait of Hormuz. In the other sense, Trump is also claiming a deal on the Strait of Hormuz is almost near, that deal being with Oman, which collects tolls. Call them service fees if you want. They are tolls. This contradiction has not necessarily been rectified in the language and rhetoric of the White House, because I don't even think I've heard a reporter ask that question. If any reporters are listening, please ask the administration that question. You all be safe. You all be kind. And I will see you at 9 a.m. for all of you that are moving over to the program with the show. Have a good one, all. And thank you.